I have got something really, really exciting for the audience today because it's a little bit different to my normal podcast that I have for property managers, but this one is still totally relevant. And I am joined today by a lovely lady called Kate, and she is a mentor for women. She is the founder of She Leads Live. Did I say that right?
She Leads Live.
She Leads Live, and it is Aussie and New Zealand's #1 women's empower event and program. And I'm really excited to have a really great chat with Kate today. So thank you for coming on board.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me here, Ashley.
So today we do want to have a chat about sort of leadership, which is really relevant in real estate. And we also want to talk about thinking outside the box, because I think real estate is really an industry that I don't actually think it's evolved. It might have evolved from the day-to-day runnings, but not really evolved dramatically like other industries. And there is no better time to talk about this than now. So speak to me, Kate, about your experience with leadership, and let's sort of kick it off with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So leadership is definitely my jam. And if I was to backtrack 10 years, I would say it'd be the word I was probably the most allergic to, because in my head, I had a really old idea of what leadership was. So I had to really redefine it for myself over the years. And so leadership to me is not about being in a position of authority or a position of power. Those things give perhaps authority, but they don't actually give leadership. Leadership is something that we all can step into. And when we step into it, shifts the course of where things are heading. So, if you actually have a look in life, things are heading in a predictable manner. So whether we look in our personal life, our relationships, our business, whether you're looking in where your property business is, or even your stuff at home, things are just drifting in a predictable direction, if we're honest.
Yeah.
And we could even safely say we could really predict where things are going to be in a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, especially when we stop bullshitting ourselves and pretending they're going to be elsewhere. And I kind of imagine it like a river. Like if there's like a little stream, that stream is just gently floating along. It's like if you were in a canoe on that stream and you weren't using your oars, you know where that will be heading to. You know where the destination you'll be going to. And that's really how things are in our life. What leadership does is when we impact that drift and when we're actually going to alter where things are heading. So leadership is about creating essentially a new future. So if you look in your business and you look at where things currently are and where they're heading, it's the leadership within you that needs to rise up and interrupt where it's drifting, or to make a shift, or to think innovatively. And we're going to talk about innovative thinking today. That will actually have things not go that way, but like a new direction. So,
yeah.
When I look at people who have essentially like they've grown and they've grown and they've grown and they keep stacking these levels of growth, whereas a lot of times people, I don't know if anyone's had this experience, like you grow and then you might take a few steps back, and then you grow and then you take a few steps back, and it's kind of like this sort of a process, right? And it can feel freaking frustrating because it's almost like you're keep oscillating back to what you know. So I've often thought, what is it that has people go growth and then growth and then growth and then growth? Because that's really what we're wanting.
Yeah,
so
and it's also one thing that I've always said about is that, and with like real estate agents, people that buy these portfolios and they're wanting to be bigger and they want that growth, but what they actually don't do is they don't evolve. And I think the evolve is sort of that change of direction with that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to learn
to
evolve. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, first of all, the first thing is actually I would say, recognize where things are drifting to. And I would suggest that, if you use this as an opportunity to either now or check in later today and just have a moment that you actually pause, step back and go, where actually are things heading towards in the areas that matter to me? I even did this in my relationship. This has been a constant process that I've done in my marriage over the last 17 years, is actually look at where are things drifting to, and is that actually where I want them to go, or whether it's in the business, and then get really clear for yourself, because it's easy to put our head in the sand with a lot of things, and that's not going to change anything. So, and then of course, I mean, you hear like, where are you now? Where do you want to go? All of that. But I want to talk about actual innovation. So I live in Bali, and there's this shortcut where we are. So to get from one part of where we live to the other part, there's this tiny little shortcut, and it's like a high traffic area. And about 3 weeks ago, I saw this big billboard, and it was this guy's face. And he was like all posing like this. And then it had underneath, "Happy birthday, baby." And I was like, oh my God, that's kind of cute. Someone's put their partner or their husband's big face up there and put "Happy birthday, baby." And my daughter was on the back of the scooter. We were kind of cracking ourselves up, and we kept scootering on. And then we kept seeing this "Happy birthday, baby" each day for about a week. Then the billboard was taken down, and that's cute. They obviously paid for a week. Now, a couple of weeks later, the billboard was back up. Same guy.
Same one.
Same guy, same dude, exact same photo, but different text. The text said, "Did you miss me? Another month of your shortcut, baby." And then his Instagram handle. And I was like,
So clever.
You smart cookie. And then so, my daughter and I, she was again on the back of my scooter, and Bailey's like, "I'm definitely going to that Instagram channel. I want to check out who the hell this guy is." Went there, 600,000 followers on his Instagram channel. And I've got to say, like, with all due respect, not like the content wasn't really like worth 600,000. It was his level of innovation.
Yeah.
So this was not obviously this guy's first rodeo of thinking outside the box. And, and the engagement was really high. So it just made me think, wow, this guy's growing like hugely with doing things that other people aren't doing.
Yeah.
And, I love, there's a quote by Steve Jobs where he says that you can't come at things with the same level of thinking that everyone else is.
Yeah.
With, do you remember Seinfeld?
Yeah. The TV series? Seinfeld. Yeah.
Well, really interesting, because when when a TV series is basically almost like proposed, it does a pilot series,
yeah,
right? Now, the pilot series of Seinfeld was actually canned. They got rid of it because the people in the sitcom department who knew how you should be doing sitcoms put it through their sitcom filter and said, this is not going to fly because of this, and this. It didn't fit into the box of how sitcoms were supposed to be. So they threw it out. Now, a guy from outside of the department that wasn't within the department, did not know how sitcoms were supposed to be, saw the potential in it. And he saw something that the others couldn't see. He was the one that pulled it off and said, "I'm going to back this because I see something in it." And it was because of his vision, because he had a different way of looking at things, that picked it up and it became what it became. Yeah. So I want to kind of go back to that Steve Jobs quote. You have to have a different set of experiences than what currently is to actually get things to the new level. So that.
I was just going to say, I guess, I mean, I'm trying to do that, and I think I naturally try and think of different things to do. I have a business partner who is very traditional, so he just likes to keep it the same like everyone else and not be, too noticed. But like a little example of just something we've actually just talked about this morning was he said to me, "Oh, Ash, we need to update our profile pictures for our website because, they're just getting a little bit old." And I was like, "Yeah, but I've just been trying to think of something different. Like, I just don't want to do photos, headshots like everyone else." And I've been sitting on it for months thinking, what could I do? And there was this real estate agent in Adelaide, and I can't remember the name of it. If anyone remembers, put a little comment in the box for me when I post this. But they actually had these really cool pet photos, and each person had a pet photo as their profile. And I remember thinking, gosh, I love that. That's really cute. But then just this morning, I've just thought to myself, I've got my business partner to go, okay, I'm actually okay with that because it's not too dramatic. But it was just getting illustrations of our current photos and using illustrations for our headshots. So just that it's not a dramatic thing, but it's just that little bit different, and something that, you know, you don't want to be the same, because you don't get noticed if you're like everybody else. And when one person has the confidence to do something a little bit different, then hopefully that inspires the next person to go, you know what, we actually can do that, because she's made a little change and she's going really good. And as time goes on, you sort of build on that, and then that's how we have a better world and a better industry, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important. Here's what I've learned over the years. And, you know, I've been teaching leadership for 10 years. And before that, I did a lot I held big government contracts where I was creating change at a national level in the health sector. Now, before that, I was at total rock bottom. And it has been so I guess I want to say is that life wasn't always like this. And I won't go into the details of that. You can always check that on my Instagram, but it was at massive rock bottom. And I really had to climb my way out of there. And I guess I want to say is that you can actually get anywhere if you're willing to keep pushing beyond where your current thinking is at. And one of the big things that I've learned over the last, I'd say 20 years, 2 decades, and I've done a lot of work on myself, and I have continually pushed the bar of what I saw was possible for me. Because my current setting, or my old setting, was, well, I'm just a drug addict from, you know, this part of where I grew up. I've got nothing to offer. Who am I to do this? And who am I to do that? And certainly if I had seen back then where I am now with, you know, creating Australasia's biggest, you know, women's leadership experience, what the big thing that I've learned over the years is that voice of self-doubt. Everyone freaking well has it. And out of all of the big fancy things we could say in this conversation, I want to hone in on that one thing. We all have that voice, and it doesn't actually go away. And it's funny because I've done every NLP strategy on it. You know, I've done everything I can think of, and that's been my big takeaway. It doesn't go away. It's still there. We still have the same flavor of what it tells us, that we're like, I'm to this, I'm to that, I'm to this, I'm to that. And what I've realized is that we've just got to stop paying attention to it and stop trying to wait until we feel like we're ready before we can do that thing. Because we just talked about being innovative, but when we go to actually be innovative, when we go to do that thing that's like, oh, wow, I think that would be a great idea. And by the way, we all have great ideas. I heard someone say the other day, I think it was the Spanx lady who's, you know, multi-billion-dollar business. She said, everyone has a multi-million-dollar idea, but it's the difference between having the idea and actually having the balls, courage, guts to action it. And then, interestingly, I find that the actioning of things is actually very simple, but what gets in the way is all of this stuff up here. So, you know, I guess I just want to drop a pin on that, is that the stuff that's in our head, it's not unique to us. And the stuff that we're telling ourselves in our head, it's actually not the truth of where our capacity is at.
And the problem as well is that not only do people have that self-doubt, but we can also have people surrounding us that put that self-doubt in us. So quite often there can be people that have got that double whammy, you know what I mean? They might have the confidence, but then might have a friend or a partner or someone who shuts that down. So there's a lot of elements to it, isn't it? You've got to be super confident. So like there's people that are naturally happy to take risks and stuff. I'm a risk taker, so I'm one of those people that does take a lot, but there's probably more people that don't. So what do you think someone could do if they don't naturally have the ability to just do that? Can you change your mind to become that? Like, you know, what tips would you give to people?
Yeah. Great question. I want to answer that on a couple of levels. First level, I haven't been naturally like this.
Okay.
So, you know, I had extreme social anxiety. There was a point where I remember vividly buying chewing gum at the counter at the supermarket and being absolutely terrified of having to speak to the checkout person. Now I'm talking on stages with 1,000 people. Now, it doesn't mean to say that it comes as the easiest thing to me. I get really nervous before a talk, but I have learned some things over the way, which I want to share. So that's the first thing I want to say. But the second thing that's also important is I don't think we end up changing our base personality. Our base personality is what we have. And I think that's really important to know. So, I'm always going to be more of the introverted type who has a tendency to want to be in the background. But what drives me and has me continually going beyond what feels often comfortable for me is that I'm playing the long game. So we can talk about actually playing the long game, but also there's a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? If I'm just going to get up on stage for the fact of getting up on stage, you probably couldn't drag me up on that stage. But when I remember why I'm doing it, and I think, there's 400 women in the audience, and I know that, so I talk about a lot about leadership and overcoming anxiety or overcoming self-doubt and then playing big. If I think about, there's 2 or 3 women in this audience, there'll always be more, but if there's 2 or 3 women in this audience that really need to hear what I'm going to say, I'm just going to speak to them. That's the only thing that gets me off my ass, to get on that stage and speak up.
Yeah, and can I jump in with that? I remember hearing someone one day, and I've always remembered this statement, and it was that you've got people that have this fear, like you might have a fear of going on stage, or people have a fear of flying. And let's just use fear of flying for an example. And you have this fear and you just won't get on a plane at all. But if you had your sick child who was overseas and you had to get on the plane to go get them, that fear goes away because that motivation's there. And so fear really is just a lack of motivation, because, and that's exactly the same as you're motivated to go on stage. So your fear is subsided for that moment because the motivation's there. But if you didn't have that motivation there, your fear, you just wouldn't do it. And that's the difference.
Yeah. Absolutely. And look, here's the thing, as humans, and I don't care, who we are or what our personality makeup is, we do thrive as humans on a challenge. And when we're given a challenge and we've got something to get our teeth into and grapple with, that's when we grow. I look at my daughter I was just saying before, she's about to turn 19. She's just gotten on a plane and flown off and shifted countries on her own. And the last 12 months for her was building up her business. She's now financially really successful. She's got a huge nest egg. She's about to buy a house. Her business is just humming. And she spent the last 12 months just dedicated. That was her challenge. But she got the business to where she wanted to be. And then she started coasting. And you could feel the backward slide because she didn't have like a real challenge for the next level. And then she said, Mum, I've got to go. I've got to go get into my next part of my adventure. And so, it's so important that we have challenges. But one thing I want to say, and I mentioned before about playing the long game, I think if we are really focused on what short-term success looks like, that's when we can get quite stuck, because we are, it's like, I've got to do this thing. Okay, so I'm going to be innovative, or I'm going to try something new. And then, does that thing work? And so either we hold ourselves back and don't take the action because we're trying to think it all first. We're trying to plan out all the steps and make sure that we avoid any obstacles. So we're doing it all in our head or in the planning mode. So we don't actually get in the game. But that's a short-term focus. And if we get to the end of that and we look back and we that didn't work, then it can be either a failure or not. We've got to take a long lens approach, which means, where do you want to be over the 4 or 5 years? And you're going to try new things. And as you try those new things, some of them are going to work, some of them aren't, but you're going to get a shit ton of learning and confidence and growth and expansion through all of those things that will then feed on to the next one. Our very first program that we created 10 years ago, we spent 2 years creating it. We got a $20,000 mortgage out on our house. And not to say the fact that my husband left his teaching job, and that was 2 years loss of income. So if we added that on, we sold about, it was under 10 items of that one product. The level of costs that it was compared to what we got was like this. But here's the thing, what we learned during those 2 years fed forward into the next program, where in a short period of time, we were able to be really to get a really financial win from it. That 2 years, a lot of people would see that as, oh shit, we failed, it didn't work, so you need to go back to your teaching and your nursing jobs. Whereas it was during that period that we got all of the inner learnings. Oh shit, we now know what not to do next time. This is what would change differently. We learned all of these skills during that time that meant the next time was more successful.
Yeah, and it's that whole analogy of you don't lose, you learn.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to teach my daughter that at the moment. She is she's 11. She's super competitive, and when I say I don't know where she gets it from, all my friends would just laugh at me and say, well, clearly she gets it from you. But I said there's a difference. I love to win. I love to be competitive. But I'm absolutely cool with losing. Don't have any problem at all with it. I don't get upset about it because I go, okay, well, it happened for a reason, number one. And number two, what did I learn from it? And naturally I do that. And trying to teach an 11-year-old, that is actually really hard, but it's something that's so important to teach girls from a young age as well, because I don't want her to grow up and be so hard on herself constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I need to get a 19-year-old that will go travel like yours. So, Oh my God, I think I finally stopped crying yesterday. do you know when she's going to come back?
No. She's definitely she's travelled off for good. She's travelled off for good. She's now. We spent the last 12 months. She moved out of home 10 months ago and moved down the road, and so she's been financially independent for 10 months now, living down the road. So she was just learning. It was like the training wheels.
Yeah.
And then after 10 months, she's, kind of felt that getting out on her own and just feels like she's her own woman now. So now it was time to go further, which is another country.
Great.
Oh, good on her. Yeah.
Excellent.
No.
Oh, no. You go.
I was just going to say, no, all of those years of, being a mum for 19 years, I'd never felt prepared for when they actually leave home. It's a very different feeling.
No, absolutely. Yeah. But then you don't want them staying at home too long either. So
exactly.
I was just going to say, I find it interesting, and when you said about that long-term sort of goal and having it, because one thing that I do differently is I with my PM Collective stuff, I actually haven't got any long-term goals. I've only got short-term goals. So for me, I feel like I just started off with, little meetings and little catch-ups, and then I've naturally let that evolve. And I'm just taking that a one step at a time. And I'm not really concerned about the long term. I'm just really happy doing my little challenges to me and little goals that I've set myself for each year, without any concern for the long term. So would you look at someone like me and sort of say, well, that's great, but you still should have a long-term goal? Or would you sort of say,
not at all?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, and here's the thing. I never saw where we are now, Ashley.
Yeah.
Never, ever saw it. All I was doing was the next thing that I felt called to, and then I'd go really boldly into that. The first thing that I could see was creating an event where we had 4 people at it.
Yeah.
And that was just all about that. So some people work really well to have a big long-term goal. I don't. I work better in having what am I creating in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we've got to know ourselves. But what I have in the long term is a context for who I want to know myself as, and growth.
Yeah.
And context is really important. So context is basically, what is the thing that shapes how we're experiencing ourselves or a situation?
Yeah.
Okay. So if my context for the thing that I'm doing in the next stretch, okay, this is my goal here, in the short term. If my context for that is, I'm doing this thing and I have to get it right, and I really want this thing that I'm doing to be successful, and my context is that really, if it isn't, then it was a waste of time. And the vision is very short term. That then is that's going to bring with it a whole host of problems. But if my context is that I want to, over my life, actually keep growing and keep growing myself as a person, and I want to grow where I'm at over time. I don't necessarily know where things are going to be over time, but I've got a different context. And that context is, it's a very long-term strategy. It's a very long-term view. I want to keep growing over the next 5-10 years. Then my focus can be, what's my next goal? Does that make sense? Because I have a sneaky feeling that you've got quite a big context for growth in the long term.
Yeah, and now that you say that, I do. So, but the practicalities, it's only short term with, so that is completely right. Yeah, I've got to like nut that out myself. But yeah, completely. The other thing I was just going to say, obviously, because our audience is property managers and BDMs, and I guess I am very passionate about property managers taking responsibility for their own growth. Each person is responsible for their own happiness, their own career, and I find that quite often people can put blame on other people. They could blame even their boss to say, well, I can't move anywhere in the business because he is a dickhead or whatever, or he doesn't allow any more room for growth. But you can't put the blame on other people. So I guess from property managers and BDMs and having that growth within your, like, whether it's to manage more properties, maybe it's to go into a BDM role, maybe it's to go into a different field. I think that's really important to people, for people to have an idea. But it's also okay for people, and this is something that I've actually had to learn a little bit, because actually, I'll tell you a funny story. I was driving along and I was with my mum, and my mum's very philosophical, and there was this bit of a bum driving, like just walking across at the lights where we were. And I had turned around and I said, I was very judgy. I said to my mum, gosh, like, how do people get themselves into that state? You know what I mean? Like, looks like he's got no job, he's this, he's that. Like, how do they even look after themselves? Like, he just looked like a real bum. And my mum turned around to me and said, Ash, it's okay for people not to have goals. Like, just because you've got goals doesn't mean that you are any better or any different. Some people are just happy living their life and comfortably and just living one day to the next. Like, they don't have aspirations, they don't want aspirations, and that is okay. And so I find it really difficult to hear people when they say they don't have any goals, because the way that I sort of see it, and a little bit like what you're saying with the stream and the river, life moves forward constantly without us even trying. Okay, just moves. If we stay still, life is going to keep on moving. So everyone needs to improve themselves 10% per year. That's sort of, do I say 10% per year? Yeah, 10% per year is what I normally say, because if you move 10% per year, you can keep up with the natural life progression. And that might be things like reading an extra book every year. Maybe it is changing one meal a day, whatever it is, very small. But I really struggle with people that don't have that natural ability to improve. Like, is that a lot of people? Like, do you experience a lot of people that are just happy with their life as it is? Or what's your advice to someone who came to you and said, I'm just happy with everything? Like, property manager saying, I'm just happy with how everything's running and that's it.
Yeah. If someone said that, I would high five them and go, good on you.
Yeah.
And also, I really believe that people want to grow, and that we have different levels of what we see as available to us at different parts in our life, and also people have different life paths. So some people experience themselves as very stuck. And so it may not even occur to them that they can actually get out of that situation that they're in. So there's no point. So the conversation of having a goal is not even relevant. I was addicted to methamphetamine, and I was in a really dark place. It never occurred to me that I could even get out of that. I did not see life beyond that for myself until I did. And then the moment I did, I fought my ass off for it. So
can you talk about how you actually got to, like, how you, what changed you? Like, what was that moment of going, I'm not doing this anymore?
I almost died.
Okay.
it got so bad that I literally had to one night face my own mortality. And it was the most confronting experience I've ever had. And I had to think to myself, and my dad's voice popped into my head and said, Katie, you can do anything with your life. And I was like, damn, I really could have. And so I literally promised myself I was going to fight and I'll do everything it took to turn my life around. But then also I decided I'm going to have to use this as a reason to, as a way to give back. Because and over the years after that, the only thing that gave me meaning, as humans, we need to have meaning in our lives. And the only thing that gave me some sense of peace of those years where I was completely off the rails was I had to find meaning in that for myself. And the meaning I've given that is that I went through those things to give myself a perspective that I can then help others. So I do think that people at our core, we want to grow, but I do think it's what we see as available to us. Now, with that, I want to say this is that if we have the ability to see something beyond our current circumstances, I think we've got to be the ones that go first. And I think we can do that in honor of the people around us who maybe don't yet. And you could think that on a scale of, let's say you live in a small town. The amount of people I coach who like small town, they're like, I'm sick of this small town thinking, or I'm sick of, like, I go to the school gates and I drop off my kid and everyone's just talking at this certain level. I'm sick of it. And so my answer is often, you've got to be the one that goes first. It's what leadership does, because when you do it and then you start really focusing on, okay, here's what I'm committed to. Here's the way I want to live my life. Here's the way I want to experience myself. And yeah, it's going to be challenging. And yes, I'm going to have to kind of rub up against some old thinking within myself, but also a lot of the old thinking that's around me, whether it's my family or my social circles, I'm going to have to really kind of push up against that. I'm going to do that for myself first and foremost, but also I'm going to know that over time, while there might be some initial flare up first of all, and there might be a few whispers behind my back, or there might be a few comments that come at me like an arrow, at the end of the day, I'm doing it knowing that over time, like a tuning fork, if you walk into a room, by the way, with a piano, there's a piano there and you've got a tuning fork and you go ding, the exact noise, the exact note that tuning fork is at is going to resonate with the exact string in the piano, and that one string is going to start vibrating.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
Wow. Yeah.
So I feel like when we decide, I'm going to go first and I'm going to just get in my lane, I'm going to grow, and I'm going to push my own limits. What we do is we act like a tuning fork for the other people around us who are also kind of like, I'm imagining like a coat over me and I'm stuck within my own self and my own thinking, but I think it's not okay to pop out because that's what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
So in going first, I kind of remind people, hey, look, it's okay. And I give people permission. And for me, what I've been wanting to do over the years is to remind other people who have been very stuck, hey, this is actually what's possible. And you do not have to be like a slave to where your past has been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what it's a bit of a shame, but it's just the way that it happens, is that we have to wait till something bad happens to make that change. Like, people need to, like, I mean, for me, it's not that it was bad, but it was still an event. But for me, it was my separation that was enough for me to go, you know what, I am now taking even more risk because I don't really give a shit anymore because, blah, blah. But it's a shame that as a human, we do wait for that rock bottom to rise up. So what's stopping us just doing it without getting to the rock bottom? But we don't, do we? Like, it's just a fascinating, the psychology behind it.
I think for me, that was my initial wake up call, and since then I have it's like that was the one rock bottom that had to affect me.
Yeah.
But it's been almost 2 decades since then, and the thing that drives me now is growth and expansion.
Yeah.
What are we playing for? What are we committed to? We moved over to Bali when things were going extremely successfully in New Zealand, and it was interesting because at the time people would say to us, "What's wrong here?" As if we would only uproot our, and sell our houses and come to Bali because there was something we were running from. It was like, no, it's just an adventure. It sounds exciting. It's like, why not? And you know what? So I used to, before all of this, I was a registered nurse. And so I nursed people in their final stages of life.
Okay.
Can you still hear me, Ashley?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great. So I nursed people when they were in their final stages of life. It was a total privilege. But one thing I would hear a lot was stories of regret.
Yeah.
And
that's such
that
a shocking,
had a profound impact on me to hear over and over again people saying, I wish that I had have lived a life that was true to myself. I wish I had have done this thing. I wish I had have spoken up. I wish I had have taken the path that was really like for me. And they always said that they felt like they would have more time. And the thing that stood out to me in those experiences and what I see is that we keep postponing the things that we know we want to do. Oh, I want to get here in my property business, or I want to get here, or I want to do this thing. And we think, oh yeah, I'll get round to it when I feel ready, when this, when that. But that's actually just it's like a holding pattern. We believe the things we're telling ourselves, but we forget that it's actually more of a patterned way of being rather than the truth of, oh yes, I need to be ready. No, what if just that way of approaching things is just a pattern that can go for years and decades, and those decades can't compound, and then all of a sudden we look back and we go, oh shit, yeah, that's right, okay. So that way of thinking was the thing that led me here.
Yeah. My thoughts are like whenever I've gone and jumped into things is just outweighing the risk. So for me, I just go, okay, I'm going to just say yes before I'm ready. I always say yes before I'm ready. And the second thing is, what's the worst thing that could happen? So the worst thing that could happen is, like for example, with the summit that I'm arranging, the worst thing that could happen is I will have a small financial loss. Do you know what? I'll get over that. It's not the end of the world, but I would regret not doing it or giving it a try. So
Amen.
That sort of is what motivates me. But I just find it's a shame when people just don't have the guts to just do it. But I do find that just for me and maybe my circle of people, it actually, I think, is not necessarily their own self-doubt. I feel like it's people around them that make them worry about things that they shouldn't really worry about. The last thing I was just going to mention, there's two things I want to mention before we sort of finish up, but one was I also am very fascinated with at what age do we stop at what age do we start worrying about those risks? So something that like a lot of people say to me is oh Ash, like how brave of you starting a business at 23, and I was like, well, actually, it's not really brave, because I think that 23 is an age where you don't calculate your risks. You can make stupid decisions without worrying about anybody else, and you just do stuff. And I said it's a naivety that I had back then that said, I'm going to do it, end of story. But there's an age that everyone gets to where they stop that, where they stop having that naivety and they start worrying about what could. And I think that age is different for everyone. Like, have you found that?
100%. Yeah, it's my husband and I will often talk about, as people get older, just getting more cemented in their ways and more cemented in their thinking, and start to, because if you think about it, quick moment here, our thinking and our beliefs, we weren't born with that. We acquired our thinking and our perspectives and our beliefs and our ways of being. We acquire that over time, and we could actually look scientifically when it all happens. But so when we're growing, it's very malleable. But as we get older, unless we have insight into this and we're willing to keep being curious in life.
Curious is a great word. Yeah.
Curiosity is the antidote to cemented ways of thinking. But if we don't do that, and the typical pathway is that we start cementing in our thinking, and then what happens is our world actually shrinks. Not the physical world, but the world in here that we experience actually gets smaller and smaller. And what happens over time, it really freaking sucks. And you can see it in people. You can see that the light has started to dim. And it's because they're looking through a world that's kind of like this. The world has got smaller. And then it creates like a vicious cycle. And then what happens is that people know,
they don't experiencing themselves as growing and expanding. They feel they experience themselves as quite small. And then they start focusing on small things.
Yeah.
And then the conversations get small, they get gossipy. They get doomsday kind of conversations. They start looking at other people and then criticizing, because it's way easier to criticize what Sally's doing than actually live a full life yourself, because then at least that makes you feel better. And then when that happens, then it just goes smaller and smaller. And that's where you see people, as they get older, they can get more frumpy in their thinking.
Yeah.
Not just like our physical ways but our actual thinking gets frumpy.
Yeah.
I've got my mentor is the most incredible guy. He's in his 70s. He's worked as a leadership consultant for NASA and Reebok.
Wow.
He's like a big freaking leadership bigwig. And he's in his 70s, and he's the most radiant, twinkly-eyed human you've ever seen at that age. Actually of anyone. And I met him, he was at this event, and I was like, saw this guy signing this piece of paper or doing something, and I was like, who the hell is he? Like, they just looked like there was magic with him. And I went over and introduced myself, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but I just really want to introduce myself. You seem like, oh, like, who are you? And his eyes are twinkly. So he has maintained a curiosity in life.
Yeah.
Major curiosity. And at the moment, he's doing a course in something, and he's learning this other thing. And he said, Kate, the antidote to all of that is curiosity.
Yeah. Without a doubt. Yeah. Be curious as to what could happen if I gave it a go or tried.
Yeah. And can I getting curious beyond our own thinking as well.
Yeah.
Like being willing to go, like, what am I not noticing here? Like, I wonder, there's a question that we've been asking ourselves in the last few months is, what would it be like? This is like an inquiry question, and feel free to borrow this, anyone.
Yeah.
What would it be like to live an expansive life?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to encourage anyone, if you want to, take on that as an inquiry question over the next month and ask yourself that one question every day. What would it be like to live an expansive life, and see what gets stirred up? It could be as simple as you're going to treat yourself in an expansive way. You could be, and all sorts of things will unfold. And like little breadcrumbs, why don't you start walking towards one of those breadcrumbs? And then keep asking, what would it be like to live an expansive life? And then keep walking towards that. And it will keep opening up new doors.
It reminds me, on the way into school today, we're at the petrol station. I've got the 3 kids, and there was a lineup of 3 Lamborghinis getting filled up with petrol, and they were hot Lamborghinis. And I said to my kids one day, we're going to have one of those Lamborghinis. And I said, and we're going to share it, and it's going to be our family car, because, some people spend $500,000 on a boat, but we're going to spend $500,000 on a really hot car. That's going to be our family car, and we're just all going to share it. And so that's our idea of living an expensive life. So that's family goals for us. It's been so lovely to chat to you. You're right up my alley with your thinking and your style. So it's been a real pleasure. And I think that the audience who listen to the podcast are very much like me, and I know they're just going to really love the inspiration behind you, and maybe a little bit of motivation, and hopefully provide them just that little bit of guts that it is okay to do something a little bit different, and start small, like you said, and and you'll get there absolutely with it all. Can I throw a random question to you and say, do you have a random book on leadership, or a random book that you would recommend people reading?
Oh my God, all of the books. Yes. I'm going to tell you my favorite book of all time, but it can take some getting into.
Yeah.
But it's called The 3 Laws of Performance.
Okay.
Absolutely extraordinary. It's written, my mentor who I mentioned, a few of the big multi-million dollar projects are in there that they worked on. It's about rewriting the future of your organization. So it's an organizational one. It's freaking incredible, but that's a really, really great one. that's a great one if anyone has the guts to read that one.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of that one, so that's wonderful. So I will get that. One thing that I am doing at my summit actually is I find that like we've all got the business books, motivational books, and we sort of read them and then we pop them away. And sometimes like I pull them out every now and then, but I'm doing a book exchange. So I've said to everyone, I want you to all bring, you know, your book that you've got at home that you finished reading with to exchange for another one that you haven't written, so that we can all exchange them, because I'm a big believer that a really great start to making changes and growing as a person is reading. So I'm very much on that. So thank you for sharing the podcast with me today. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Kate, I will tag you into everything. You're on LinkedIn, Facebook?
I'm mainly actually on Instagram and Facebook.
Sorry, Instagram was actually what I was trying to, that's what I was thinking as I was saying LinkedIn. Sorry.
Instagram and Facebook, I hang out a lot, and I do daily Instagram stories and a lot of conversations. There are leadership, parenting, relationships. I've got a range of conversations that I'm having there over on my Instagram page.
Excellent, no worries. Well, I will jump on there, and anyone that wants to connect with Kate, please do the same. Lovely to chatting you. I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me here, Ashley.
No worries. Thank you. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.